Now on BBC One, tonight's edition of South Today with Bruce Parker and Sally Taylor.
A Hampshire Marine shot dead by a colleague in Belfast.
The Navy criticises reckless amateur divers after 2 deaths.
Harwell scientists pour cold water on the nuclear fusion theory.
And Britain's first official dog warden says tougher controls are needed.
Good evening. A 21-year-old Royal Marine from Aldershot has been killed while serving in Northern Ireland. It's thought Marine Adam Gilbert was accidentally shot by one of his colleagues early this morning while on foot patrol in Belfast.
The Royal Navy has criticised the recklessness of some amateur divers following a big increase in the number of cases needing treatment in their specialised decompression units at Portsmouth. The criticism comes after 2 divers died in separate incidents less than 2 days apart off the Isle of Wight. 2 other people with them were airlifted for treatment by Royal Navy specialists. So, Michael, you must feel very strongly about this, voting against your own government. What is the case for a dog register, actually?
Quite simply, to gain control of the dog population in England.
But one of the reasons we gave up dog licences was that only 50% of owners bothered to take them out.
Well, the licence was an absurd figure, 35 pence. It cost 3.5 million to collect and brought in 1 million in revenue. There was absolutely no encouragement or incentive for anybody to make it work.
But don't you think a dog register itself would be a bureaucratic nightmare to set up and keep going and administer?
It depends how you do it. I mean, remember, the local government bill of last year does give local authorities the right to set up such a register. What it doesn't do is say they must set it up. And as is always the case in this world, if you say somebody can do something, but that they don't have to do it, they generally don't do it. Now, in 1983, we said to the district councils in Northern Ireland that they should set up a dog registration scheme. They have, and it is working extremely well. That's this government. So in Northern Ireland, they believe a dog registration scheme is right, and it's proved itself to be right. But for some strange reason, they say that the same argument doesn't apply to England. But I cannot follow the logic of that approach.
But I'm still not clear what a dog register would actually produce, alleviate, improve, or whatever.
Well, what it would seek to do is, in fact, to once again make a dog owner license their animal, and by paying for the license for that animal, contribute funds to the local authority which would enable it to set up a dog warden scheme. And the dog warden's task would be to apprehend those owners who allow their animals to foul in public places, parks and so on, where children and others play and enjoy themselves, to have a means of controlling strays in society, and Lord knows there are an awful lot of scavenging strays now in council estates, and generally to apprehend those owners who have dogs which have proved themselves to be vicious and which should be possibly destroyed because of their viciousness.
Finally, it was a slim majority for the government, 13. Do you think the issue will come up again?
I think the government got a shock last night. I don't think they realised the strength of feeling on the Conservative benches. I hope that they won't just go away and say, well, we won and that's the end of the day. I've no doubt at all that it's going to come up in the House of Lords. I hope the Lords amend the bill, and when the amendment comes back to the Commons, it will be one to say there should be a dog registration scheme, and the government will have the good grace to accept it.
So Michael McNair-Wilson in London, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
You're watching South Today from the BBC.
Still to come tonight, a birthday treat to celebrate when the coach and horses gave way to the age of steam.
All the way from Turkey, but not under her own steam, the latest attraction on the Swanage Railway.
And a weekend of medieval pageantry recording a famous victory for English bowmen at Agincourt in 1415. Time now, 1845.
Good evening. Tonight's news from around the region.
And the 3-day event of medieval Southampton will start tomorrow.
Back in medieval times, they used seaweed, of course, to say what the weather's going to do.
Oh, do we use something a little bit more sophisticated now then, do we?
Well, we do. We use our noses now. Do you know, I was talking to a colleague of mine just about the smell of seaweed the other day, because in Southampton, when you can smell the seaweed coming in off the sea, you know, you've got a sea breeze in. When they could smell it down in the Falklands, they knew they were going to have fog within the next 5 hours, so they called all the planes back. We didn't quite smell the seaweed today, but we did get the sea breeze in, and you can see on the satellite picture a little line of cloud just inland from the south coast. That's caused by when the sea breeze comes in, it hits the northerly land breeze and you get the air going up in the middle forming little clouds. It did nothing but just form a bit of cloud for us, and I think that tomorrow we're not even going to see that. High pressure is covering the whole of Britain now, and with high pressure it's a good time to set a barometer. And there, for tomorrow, is the pressure. It's going to be 1,027 millibars, which is 30.33 inches, and the whole way through the day we're going to have almost unbroken sunshine. It won't be quite as hazy as it has been today, particularly on the coast where we had the sea breeze coming in. It got a bit hazy for a time, but everywhere is going to have nice bright sunshine the whole way through the day. So once again, temperatures are going to get up really quite high. 27 degrees Celsius is 81 Fahrenheit, but even along the coast there it's going to feel very pleasant indeed. In fact, probably a bit better than inland, because you're going to find a bit of a sea breeze again setting in the afternoon. The winds in the morning will be northerly or perhaps even easterly, and over the land very, very light indeed. That's just 3 miles an hour. It's hardly a breeze at all, but in the afternoon a nice southeasterly setting in along the coast. And for anyone who is sailing this weekend, and I know there is a big race around the Isle of Wight on Saturday, there's not going to be a lot of wind at all. A variable wind of force 3 or less, and just local sea breezes coming in the afternoon, and the whole way sunshine through the weekend. And there's a summary really of tonight, tomorrow and the weekend indeed. Dry, nice and warm still, and sunny the whole way through the days, so it's going to be a very nice picture indeed. In fact, we may even see it continuing well into next week.
To be safe, I don't see forecasts like that very often, do you? Now, the main news of the day. A £10,000 reward has been offered by Barclays Bank after an armed gang raided a branch of Bloxham in Oxfordshire. The gang had held members of 2 families hostage before the raid. In China, 3 men have been sentenced to death after being convicted of setting fire to a train in Shanghai during the recent unrest. And the Soviet President, Mikhail Gorbachev, has ended his visit to West Germany. Before he left, Mr. Gorbachev said the eventual removal of the Berlin Wall was not a major problem.
And here in the south, an army investigation is underway after a Royal Marine from Aldershot in Hampshire was accidentally shot dead by a colleague in Belfast this morning. 21-year-old Adam Gilbert had been in Northern Ireland for less than a month. There's been a big increase in the number of divers being treated for the bends at HMS Vernon in Portsmouth. A senior Navy instructor says some amateur divers are being reckless. Dr. Martin Fleischmann, the Southampton University professor who claims to have found a revolutionary method for producing nuclear fusion, is to carry on with his experiments even though scientists at Harwell say his method doesn't work.
Finally, a quick look at some of this evening's newspapers here in the south, and the prize, if there were one, for front pages this evening would go to the news in Portsmouth with this dramatic coverage of last night's gas explosion. Photographer, by the way, Innes Marlowe. The Echo in Southampton also runs the fare and explosion as its lead story, with the one word there, fireball, as its headline. And the Bournemouth Echo, with the headline, Wire Trap in the Park, highlights the dangers joggers have been facing in Merrick Park with wires stretched across paths they use.
Just to remind you, tomorrow we'll be at Goodwood at the races, the South Today Stakes, 6:35 live tomorrow night. Good night.
Good night.
Thursday evening on BBC One begins with Top of the Pops and music from Jason Donovan, Fuzzbox and Sunita. At 7:30, the fight's on to save the community centre.
This Mrs. Butcher, she's not the type who could stir up trouble if we did condemn the place, is she?
Mrs. Butcher's not exactly the kind of figure people rally around, if you want the truth, Councillor.
At 8 o'clock, Compo, Clegg and Seymour are taking to the slopes. Then at 8:30, In Sickness and in Health, and Alf's on the Snoop.
You're not supposed to read that. That's why it's got to stand public with a picture of the Queen looking sideways, so even she can't see what's inside.
At 9:30, Phil Cool. Or is it? Sir Robin Day's guests at 10 o'clock are MPs Peter Walker, Paddy Ashdown and Marjorie Molam, with journalist Peter Jenkins. Thursday night on One.
with stereo sound on Radio 1 FM and making his debut on the Pops, Simon Parkin. Thank you, Mark. What a programme we've got for you tonight.
Well, I know what's right. I got just one line. In a world that keeps on pushing me around, but I'll stand my ground.
This Sunday on BBC One, the award-winning series Super Sense discovers how animals sense impending storms, how migrating birds navigate their routes, and explores the variety of highly tuned senses of mammals and fish.
The shark, perhaps the most feared of all animals, has an array of super senses. It can detect subtle changes in the Earth's magnetic field. It can also sense the electricity of life itself.
Take flight into the fascinating world of Super Sense this Sunday at 7:45 on BBC One.
Seymour comes up with another madcap scheme in half an hour when he determines to provide the Yorkshire Dales with a snowless ski resort in Last of the Summer Wine. First, a determined Mo is on the warpath battling for command of the community centre in EastEnders.